time ago, before the English arrived, before the Dutch landed, before the Macassans sailed from the north, back when giant animals still roamed the land, when New Guinea was part of Greater Australia. We were here.
This is ancient shoreline of Lake Mungo. The freshwater mussel shell there. That's still in situ. There's a lot of shell-midden sites have been found around this great lake, so it must have been a standard part of their diet, the mussels.
This is clearly an occupation site, and there's a large horsehoof core. They were struck on the bottom side. That flake would be a sharp flake, used like a knife, taken away, while this was carried around, and it's like a toolbox. When one flake was worn out, he'd make another one. This would have been made 35,000, 40,000 years ago, and it's been sitting here ever since.
It's when the Aboriginal people actually occupied and lived here and cooked and hunted and fished and brought up their children, and and it's part of our ancestors, if we can connect to something like that through our ancestors, to me it's magic.
Most Aboriginal dreaming stories tell us people have been here for all of time. But the archaeological story starts here at Lake Mungo, with the discovery of the oldest known Australian.
Returning to camp here one late evening, I found appearing on the surface this block of carbonate with burnt bone in it. Picking up the blocks, out dropped a piece of human jaw. And that was the exciting moment when suddenly Australian archaeology took a leap backwards. Not only a leap backwards in time, but a leap forwards in its understanding of the earliest Australians. Who were these people?
Mungo Man is the oldest Homo sapien, or modern person, found outside Africa. He is 42,000 years old. Through his bones, we begin to know this man. With the elders' permission, Mungo Man's remains are being studied at the Australian National University.
White to black, could you give me a bit of an idea what you think he might be?
Yeah, well, he would have been individual, probably living in his 40s, a man living in his 40s, just under 6 feet tall. We start to find a lot of information about Mungo Man revealed on his teeth. And you can see here an oblique pattern of wear on what's called the occlusal surface, the top surface of the first, second and third molars. And under microscopic examination, there have been identified a number of striations. It's been suggested that perhaps this is from gripping the fibre in their teeth and stripping and stringing together to make nets. Interestingly also, we have the missing canines. Both canines are missing, and it's been suggested by one paleoanthropologist that perhaps this represents the intentional removal of the tooth as some sort of ceremonial gesture called tooth avulsion. And we know this hasn't happened post-mortem because we get filling in of the what's called the alveolar recess, the hole where the teeth sits. Looking at his long bones, his arm bones, he's a very sort of strong, athletic sort of individual with a bit of arthritis, so a very achy elbow. It's thought that the degeneration here that's occurred in the arm bone is a result of throwing a spear repetitively over a few decades and slowly wearing down the joints. Here's his other ulnar, and you can see he preferred the use of his right arm, and you've got quite a bit of modification going on there. Caused a fair bit of pain in his arm, and you can imagine him sitting on the lunette rubbing that joint late at night.
Just the way he was buried, I could not found around Mungo. That suggested that he was probably a chief within the tribe. So that's how I imagine the Mungo man to be very important in the tribe, the leader, buried like that.
For his burial, Mungo man was covered in highly prized red ochre and ritually laid out, indicating a belief in the afterlife. This could be the earliest evidence of spiritual belief in the world.
You know, these ancient people have, I guess, had a second life in a way, and they've brought all this information and knowledge about significance and the antiquity and the complexity of the lifestyles these people lived. Like, each individual has an individual story of their life in that system as it changed over 42,000, 45,000 years.
That's why I believe, that's why these human remains are coming out, to teach us, to teach the scientific world about how the people adapted to those dramatic climatic changes over all those years, and the continuous connection to country we as Aboriginal people had all those years, and we've still got to the country we live in.
The earliest evidence of human occupation in Australia dates to over 50,000 years ago. That's 10 times as old as the pyramids of ancient Egypt. Neanderthals, not Homo sapiens, dominated Europe. And people won't arrive in the Americas for another 30,000 years. How did Mungo Man and his ancestors come to be in Greater Australia so early in human history? Where did they come from? Scientists have discovered through DNA analysis that his ancestors were the first modern people to leave Africa over 70,000 years ago. They migrated along the edge of Asia for thousands of years, until finally confronted by the open seas separating Asia from Greater Australia. For the first time in their journey, there was no more land to be seen. Like astronauts launching into space without knowing there is a planet to sustain them. Our ancestors made the first open ocean crossing in human history. In Gumbalanya, in Arnhem Land, there is a dreaming story that echoes that first sea voyage and explains the spread of people across the continent.
Oh, wow.
Creation Mother, Yingana.
Yingana.
She actually came from far north somewhere. Kakbi, we say in our language, Kakbi.
Yeah.
That's where she came.
Yeah.
Start her journey.
These stories of Yingana, for example, match up beautifully with the archaeological story that's being told in this region. And so archaeologists who've been excavating in quite nearby in Kakadu National Park and in Arnhem Land are finding quite old dates. Some of them, up to 50, 60,000 years old, that people were living here and, hunting and so forth. And what they're suggesting is that people probably came from the north, like you say Yingana did, and came across the ocean from the islands and settled in Australia about 50 to 60,000 years ago. So I guess, I'd be interested to hear what you think of that.
She actually maybe come far somewhere.
Further north.
See, these, they all stringy bag, dilly bag. The one she was carrying lots and lots and lots of babies. When the sea was calm, wind was calmed down, that's where she started travel. Then she came somewhere on the coastline. She stopped. She put one first baby, gave him a language, moieties, skin names, clan, ceremony. First one. Then she traveled halfway somewhere number 2. Give him a different language, different clan, different ceremonies. Then so on. Far south, east, traveling, putting these babies.
The first Australians found a virgin continent whose plants and animals had been evolving in isolation for 65 million years.
What you see today in this area is nothing like what people would have come across when they first got to Australia. It would have been a totally different and totally foreign environment for them. And that includes totally new animals. Crossing rivers, when you know that these giant crocodiles are in them, it would have just been terrifying. But ironically, even today, it's the plants that get people more than the animals. It's eating the wrong berry or eating the wrong piece of fruit that can kill you or can make you really, really sick. So there would have been a lot of that sort of experimentation going on in the early days of working out what they can eat, what they can't eat, and what it does to you. So people today are amazing with their knowledge of bush foods and bush medicines, and that's built up over a very long period of time, and something the new people into the country wouldn't have had. That is a huge human challenge, and one that we're only just starting to understand. You know, we're just starting to get hints at how complicated life was for people when they first got here, and hints at how they managed to survive. It's extraordinary they didn't get back in their boats and go home again, you know, after they saw some of the things they saw here.
The main predators they encountered were not mammals, but reptiles like Megalania. Over 6 meters long and weighing more than a ton, Megalania was the largest predator people have ever known. People saw strange new creatures hopping instead of walking, and giant flightless birds like Genyornis, 5 times the weight of an emu. The latest fossil evidence tells us that Genyornis has been extinct for 40,000 years.
My father say, like we say for Jawi, for big bird, Nabrendak Wang. Yeah. This bird is different, it's big, and it's been walking on this Jawan land long time ago.
Much bigger than emu beak, eh?
Emu too small for him. He's a big bird that been walked this country, and then all my ancestors saw him, and they came to come to this beautiful flat rock to draw him.
This is the only representation of Genyornis that we know of. The main features, particularly the head, which is distinctly un-emu-like. It's got this very solid beak coming right up pretty well in line with the skull. It's then also got huge thighs and relatively short legs for the size of the thighs. And again, when you get down to the feet, they're just massive. Unlike an emu, which when they depict emu feet, they have a long, sharp-pointed claw. Genyornis doesn't. It has a very short, blunt claw. So it's by eliminating the attributes of an emu that we get to, well, what else could it be? And the nearest thing that looks like that is reconstructions of Genyornis. Whoever painted this had seen the bird. They knew the bird.
The oldest dated painting in the world is around 40,000 years old. If Genyornis went extinct 40,000 years ago, then this could be one of the oldest paintings ever made. Ancient rock art across the continent shows that from early on, our ancestors engraved and painted what they saw around them. It was a way of making the strange familiar. Everywhere people created monuments of meaning and beauty. None more spectacular than Gabarnmung on the Arnhem Land Plateau, rediscovered just 3 years ago.
Right from the very beginning, when the first ancestors came here, they made roots in their country, in their places. So what we're dealing with is not just a place where people are just wandering and following game as if they themselves are animals chasing other animals. We're dealing with people who are making roots in their own environments with their ancestors, creating meaning in the landscape.
Nagaga ni wala nga barngok ka na gaonan ko painting ni wala gero gaon ko heden. It's an old Woomera. The old people used to hook a spear and chuck it and spear the kangaroo. All right. But they left it there. We are not allowed to get it. This here is a clever stick. One is gone. As they hit it together, a big fish and a corby dancing. Maybe a young man to be initiated. Or maybe just a big fish. That when we go for ceremony. So they left it here too.
Margaret's people lived in the Gubbarnmun rock shelter for at least 48,000 years.
What's here? Oh. It's just, I don't know how, but they made it to stay beautiful forever. Look at his 5 hands. There, there's that hand there over there. Might be my great-great-grandfather. In our culture, we feel our ancestors are here. And for these Nini, they look after all inside the cave. They stay and look after this country for me. And my father said, you're not to leave the place, come back and check on this country all the time. It's beautiful, that place.
Jawoyn elders have invited archaeologists from France and Australia to study Gubbarnmun. They have just discovered the rock shelter was painstakingly hollowed out tens of thousands of years ago.
Auntie, we've got something to show you here.
All right, my son.
See the pillars on the other side, the stone pillars? A long time ago, here was the same as what you can see over there. But the ancestors, they started from the outside and they started taking these blocks of rock out. And one at a time, they pushed the pillars away and they removed them. And then slowly they came in like this until now, when this is the last one that was left from that work that they were doing.
Oh, it's amazing. Good one.
40,000 years before Stonehenge was constructed in Britain, Margaret's ancestors were removing pillar after pillar to engineer a site of great cultural significance.
Jean-Jacques worked that one out with his skills, with his eyes.
Yeah, you're very good, Jean-Jacques. I thank you.
The main entrance to the site was a grand stone archway, which has now collapsed.
Et avant, before, il y avait ici une grande arche qui reliait ce point-là à ce point-là.
So that's what it used to look like a
This
long
one
time
here.
ago. This one here. That used to be like it is here, but a big archway here. So that when the ancestors walked through, that's what it looked like.
Oh, come on. That's really good news.
Very
Thank
good
you,
news.
Jean-Jacques, again. Now I can picture them as they come through. Thank you, my son.
Margaret's ancestors were much more than monumental stonemasons. They also invented technologies that radically changed their access to resources. Ground edge tools first appeared in Europe with the invention of agriculture 10,000 years ago. Margaret's ancestors were making ground edge tools over 35,000 years ago.
That piece of axe there used to be attached to a bigger rock, to a whole axe.
Yeah.
And the ancestors, they made that axe by grinding up the stone against another stone. And that piece there was broken off when they were trying to sharpen it or something like that. That came from a spot close like that. But 35,000 years ago, when that one was made, that wasn't a hole in the ground. That was the surface of the site. It was a long way lower than what it is today. Mm-hmm. And then over thousands of years, the ancestors, they built fires, the wind blew in the sand, the dust, and the soil built up and built up, and it buried this one. It covered it up with soil.
Yeah.
And the charcoal that was next to that one, right next to it and above it and underneath it, we did carbon dating on that charcoal.
Yeah.
And that's how we know how old it is.
Grinding an axe allows the same stone to be used again and again. But these axes were not just efficient tools. They could also be ceremonial objects of great beauty.
We found another axe. It's complete. Look, it's really a very well preserved tool. You see how it's really beautiful.
It is.
Yes.
Beautiful.
You see on the other side.
Yeah.
And it is very fine grain stone. And really. And the handle was on this side. The axe is short.
Yeah.
You know? You remember from your ancestors?
Yeah, I remember. My daddy told me a lot of story about stone knife and stone axe. It was used with a handle they had.
The handle was made of wood?
Yeah, wood.
Yes.
Pot of wood. And stick it together with a honey bee.
Honey bee?
Yes, so it was just with strong glue, so all tight. And then tie it up with a string bark and make it stronger to hit sugar bag and kangaroo as they cut the bones, so that the bones.
I think they were very useful.
Yeah, that's things that my grandpa told me.
Mm.
If Margaret wasn't here, we just have rocks and soil. But we're not just dealing with bits of stone that's in the ground. We're dealing with something that is meaningful from the ancestors, that's meaningful today. It's revealing aspects of
You're special
story.
You're special people. And in those cracks that all of me, they stay. Every morning as they can, they are guiding them all the time.
In Western Europe, when we study the stone, when we study an archaeological site, the things are cold. Here they are really living. It's between moral and intellectual and something very spiritual dimension. And here, really, I learned from Margaret. That's the difference.
They are magic people that they look through the stone and the dirt. But to me, my grandparents, they are here.
are many millions of ancient artworks across Greater Australia. The continent is like a giant canvas, with each work offering a unique insight into a time long ago. In Murujuga, our ancestors created the first image of the human face in history. With around 1 million engravings over 300 square kilometres, Murujuga is the largest gallery in the world. Archaeologist Ken Mulvaney is working with Wonguju elder Wilfred Hicks to piece together the story of these ancient self-portraits. Wilfred has a bad leg injury and cannot walk the distance, so he has brought Ivan Dale to accompany him.
Joy! Oh! Panjalan niya daw, karang-karang mangayo. Karang-karang niya ko puro ano eh. May nga yiri yung ko eh. Kali karang-karang na puma.
Ivan, you know, the faces I was talking about, there's one really interesting one just down here that I'll show you. There's 70-odd faces that I'm aware of across the archipelago. Each of them are individual. You notice the classic face with the central dots, concentric ring. But what's nice about this one, it's actually got two faces incorporated in it, and it's using that early style geometric designs which use the dots and the lines dividing up space, incorporating that along with the faces. The early art is really complex in its design elements. What people thought originally, well, it was simple that developed into more complex art. Well, that's not the case here. It was complex right from the start and continued the way through. We know from geological studies how slow the weathering rate of these rocks are, and they are amongst the slowest that have been measured anywhere in the world. You can't actually see the individual peck marks anymore. They've actually weathered away. And for that degree of weathering, I'm confident of that this has taken tens of millennia. So something like this is at least 25,000 and could be as old as 35,000 years.
For the first time in human history, people saw their own eyes in their own creation.
Good. Oh. A lot of spiritual issues that are still on this land here, and they are alive. That's why you've got to talk to the land when you come here. Those rocks are very precious for us. They leave things as a Bible to us, and when we see it, we know what it's all about. And when they go to culture law, they are taught all that.
35,000 years ago, Wilfred and Ivan's ancestors were living in a very different environment. Back then, the sea was 70 metres below the level it is today. Murujuga was not a peninsula jutting into the ocean, but a hill rising above a large plain. An environment rich with resources.
People were coming back to the same location to produce these faces. They're not across the whole landscape, they're at very specific places, but usually near where there's water, and we've got that large water hole just up from here, and presumably before the sea levels came in, this would have been a nice access valley off the plains where they were hunting the kangaroos and emu and coming back in here for the water. Clearly, the people who were producing them had a joy in the way they were doing art, because they're just spectacular stuff. There is nowhere else in the world that has that longevity of art production in the same technique. It's phenomenal.
What can you say, you know? It's been here for, and all people was here.
Today, Murujuga is the site of the largest gas refinery in the Southern Hemisphere. Just a few hundred meters away, in an unmarked jumble of rocks, is a prehistoric masterpiece. There's another ancient face, and people who appear to be climbing poles. Incredibly, both the face and the climbers are also engraved 800 kilometers away in Maru country in the Little Sandy Desert, showing a long-distance connection from very early on.
Look at that. Really old. Oh, really, really old.
All fading away.
So, Timmy, this one here was the one which is really hard to see, but very, very special because it's actually got a line and it's got a human figure actually climbing up.
Yeah.
But incredibly, on the left-hand side, we have a human figure in side profile climbing up a pole. They actually are exactly the same as the climbing figures found
800 kilometres away.
You know, Nalama, Yabwara, Madadunara country. So my question is, how come we've got the same picture here really, really early and all the way over to the coast? Do you think maybe someone travelled, or it's the same jukur?
Well, the same jukur from coastal side to end up here, because everything all coming from that end, long time. It's gone.
So all that jukur comes from the coast?
Yeah.
Yeah.
One boggling.
Here too is an archaic face.
Something amazing. It's got eyes, mouth, and it's actually got a mara, hand, lifted up to the side. And it almost looks like that famous depiction, The Scream. It's incredibly emotive, incredibly strong. It's telling us that people are representing symbolically a whole range of emotions and a whole range of probably religious belief systems which are part of this early occupation of the deserts.
Archaic faces were engraved over thousands of kilometres right across the deserts of West and Central Australia. A cultural connection over vast distances. A connection that's mapped in dreaming tracks. All these Maru men, Jeffrey Stewart, Jimmy Morgan, and Timmy Patterson, were raised in the Western Desert before any contact with modern Australia. Their parents lived fully traditional lives, just like their ancient ancestors. In their language, in their belief system, in their culture and law, there is a direct connection going back tens of thousands of years.
My people were here, all people. They was just traveling, wandering around here.
Yeah.
You know. All right. You will be working?
Yeah.
You know, but and they move on. My near a good.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like Malul time, they wait here if they not will be cooling, you know. Maybe that way, kairi. Kapi kata kalau dulu gue ini dengan lemen. Nah dengan bedul gue lemen. Akhirnya aku ke yo bayan ko. Nah apa nampak? Kenapa orang kau dulu nak jadi?
Telling the stories about the seven sisters. They all around, went all over, right back, right up to this went ran and ran.
Just as their ancestors have done for thousands of years, the men repeat the dreaming stories about ancestral beings that created the deserts of Australia. The paths they forged, the mountains, animals, and laws they made. When their awesome creative period ended, many dreaming beings ascended to the sky to become stars.
People shared those narratives. They actually knew the precise locations of where ancestral beings went, where they made waters, where they met other ancestral beings, and where they actually reside in places like this, through things like songlines and through very, very detailed maps of country. That kind of information exchange over thousands of kilometres is extreme, even at a global level. That's an amazing amount of information shared by people over an area half the size of Australia. Truly incredible.
There were hundreds of dreaming tracks that crisscrossed the continent. They could take physical form as maps, often in prominent places.
Here we have heavily pecked circles, and these pecked circles are actually joined together with little pathways, making a major pathway through here. The way people represent waters are either circles like this or concentric circles, and they're actually joined by lines because they're small valleys. So this, in fact, is a very, very early Aboriginal map of waters for this remote part of the Western Desert. It's old, it's extremely old. We're not talking maps from the time of Columbus. We're not talking about maps from the time of Christ or the Phoenicians or even the beginning of agriculture. We're talking about maps which are probably tens of thousands of years old. These are, in fact, the earliest maps that we know of in the world. Maps that show country that people lived, used and enjoyed and created narratives of their ancestral beings. Anyone standing on this range would see where the waters were located in this range, but then as we look towards the west, and we can see that rise on the horizon, that's actually the Durbar Ranges, and that is showing the location and direction of major waters, including springs. This is prominent, this is meant to be seen, this is a blueprint for survival in the desert environment of Australia.
The maps followed water and dreaming tracks, but they were also long-distance highways for trade.
Things like pearl shells were traded from the Pilbara coast and the Kimberley right across into South Australia. That's an enormous distance for a trade good to travel during the first several thousand years of occupation of the continent. In Central Australia, ochres are being exchanged between groups over hundreds of kilometres. The trade and distribution of stone tools, of particular raw materials, of marine animals like shellfish, which were used as water containers, as ornaments, as personal jewellery, and a whole range of other goods which were special, revered or sought after, crisscrossed the continent right in the earliest phase of occupation between 30 to 50,000 years ago. And the one that we tend to forget, ideas.
We know from the historical records that the exchange of ideas and cultural knowledge was both rapid and over vast distances. The Chitjangala ceremony was exchanged from Queensland south to the Great Australian Bight and right across to northwest Australia. Practically the entire continent. More than just a dance, the Chitjangala contained important cultural information that would be transferred to the next group with each performance. Ceremonies like the Chitjangala would have been performed for tens of thousands of years. People would have gathered along the trade routes for days, even weeks, to perform rituals, settle disputes, arrange marriages, exchange information. The stuff of life. These networks of trade and cultural exchange enabled people in the ancient past to travel to all the different environments found in Greater Australia, even the coldest. 42,000 years ago, a land bridge opened to Tasmania as seas fell, allowing access for the first time. People moved into even the freezing Central Highlands.
Walking track would have been beautiful. Go through there.
We, the people walking through, going to the rock shelter, were staying there overnight, off for camp. Just a beautiful valley too.
When people first occupied this landscape, they would have been able to walk from Melbourne to Hobart. And the evidence that we've got here suggests that people use this as a highway. Geographically, the valley at that time of occupation would have been clear of trees because the temperatures would have been too cold for trees to survive here. That's the site, isn't it wonderful? It's got a lovely ambience to it. Nice straight rock shelter, but it comes right over just there, you see? So.
Yes, it gives you plenty of protection, eh?
We have been here when it's rained and the water's all there, flown over there, so it's completely dry. And that's what's preserved a lot of the sediments, is that there's been no intrusion of water or anything like that.
The Parmethana rock shelter had been lived in continuously for 35,000 years, almost the entire period of occupation in Tasmania. When people first arrived, they were surrounded by glaciers. Humans had never travelled so far south on the planet.
In this square here, it's where we put the 1 by 1 metre, just in there, and we went down about 2 metres. And all through the deposit, there are artefacts in different concentrations. Thumbnail scrapers, burnt bone, hearths, charcoal, you name it. And then below that rich organic layer, we got dates, further dates of 28, 30, and the final 2 dates dated on 2 individual pieces of charcoal were about 35,000 years ago.
By 35,000 years ago, people are living in every ecological niche of the continent. As modern people's first long-distance nomads, they came, they saw, and they adapted sustainably.
These were highly socially sophisticated peoples. Their societies had kinship systems, cosmologies, religions, and ways of interacting with the land which were sustainable to the extent that people enjoyed, loved, moved, and interacted with each other and their environment in ways which would last at least another 50,000 years.
It is astounding how long people have been here. It's also astounding to have a direct link to an ancient past.
When I come back, it feels like I'm here, even like I feel that my family are here with me. When I feel it, I start to cry, that they say to me, "Welcome home, Margaret."
The first Australians had penetrated to all corners of the harshest habitable continent. But conditions would get even harsher. A 10,000-year ice age turned Greater Australia into a cold, dry desert.
Next Sunday at 9:25, imagine surviving a drought that lasted for 15,000 years. First Footprints. Next, leading art critic Andrew Graham Dixon crosses the Atlantic to explore the art of America.